The camera sat on my nightstand for 8 months after Sarah died. A vintage Nikon film camera, the kind she'd carried everywhere during our 12 years of marriage. I'd wake up every morning and see it there. A silent reminder of all the photographs we'd never developed together. All the memories frozen inside that I was too afraid to face. My name is David, and I thought I knew everything about my wife. I thought our love story was simple, beautiful, complete. But grief has a way of peeling back layers you never knew existed, revealing truths that change everything you believed about your life. It was a Tuesday morning in March when I finally picked up that camera. The house had become unbearably quiet since the funeral. Sarah's sister Emma had stopped calling as frequently. My colleagues had run out of sympathetic looks to give me. Life, as everyone kept telling me, was supposed to go on. But how could it when I was still living in a museum of our past? The camera felt heavier than I remembered. Sarah had taken it with her everywhere during the last 6 months of her life, even after the diagnosis. Especially after the diagnosis. She'd said photography helped her feel alive, helped her capture beauty when her body was failing her. I'd supported it, encouraged it even, thinking it was her way of coping with the breast cancer that would eventually take her from me. I'd never asked what she was photographing, never demanded to see the images. I'd given her that privacy, that space to process her mortality in her own way. It seemed like the loving thing to do now. Holding that camera, I realized I'd given her something else entirely. The photo lab was a small shop tucked between a dry cleaner and a Vietnamese restaurant in the older part of town. The kind of place that still developed actual film, run by people who remembered when photography was an art that required patience. A bell chimed above the door as I entered, and the smell of chemicals and paper hit me immediately. The man behind the counter was in his 60s, with silver hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. His name tag read Martin. He looked up from a contact sheet he was examining and offered a professional smile. "Help you with something?" I placed the camera on the counter carefully, like it might shatter. "I need the film developed. All of it. There are several rolls inside, I think." Martin picked up the camera with the reverence of someone who understood its value. He turned it over in his hands, checking the film counter. Beautiful piece. "Don't see many of these anymore." He paused, his fingers finding the rewind crank. "Looks like there are at least 4 rolls here." "You want standard prints or everything?" I interrupted. "I want to see everything." "Whatever's on there." He must have heard something in my voice because his expression shifted slightly. "These yours?" "My late wife's." The words still felt foreign in my mouth. My wife. As if she was simply running behind schedule, not gone forever. Martin nodded slowly, understanding passing across his features. "I'm sorry for your loss." He pulled out an order form. "It'll take about a week for all of them. We process film in batches now. Not enough demand for daily developing anymore. That's fine." I filled out the form, my handwriting shakier than I expected. "Thank you." I was almost to the door when he called out. "Sir." I turned back. Martin was standing now, the camera still in his hands, an odd expression on his face. "I don't usually do this, but when these are ready, you should look at them alone first. Before sharing with anyone else?" The words hit me strangely. "Why would you say that?" He set the camera down gently. "I've been in this business 40 years. Developed a lot of film, seen a lot of photographs. Sometimes I can just tell when a roll is going to contain complicated memories. That's all." He offered a small, sad smile. "Just a suggestion." I left the shop with his warning echoing in my mind. Complicated memories. What did that even mean? The week that followed was torture. I found myself imagining what might be on those rolls. Pictures of her garden, probably. Sarah had spent hours among her roses and tomatoes, especially during her treatment. Maybe photographs of the harbor where we'd scattered some of her ashes. She'd always loved watching the boats come in. Or maybe there would be self-portraits. Documentation of her illness, her way of processing the changes in her body. That thought made my chest tight. I wasn't sure I was ready to see Sarah looking at herself with the knowledge of her own mortality. But Martin's warning kept nagging at me. Complicated memories. Look at them alone first. On the 8th day, Martin called. "Your order is ready, Mr. Chen." I left work early, driving across town with my heart hammering. The shop was empty when I arrived, and Martin emerged from the back room carrying a large envelope. It was thicker than I'd expected. "It's for complete rolls," he said, setting it on the counter. 144 exposures total. She was quite the photographer. I reached for the envelope, but his hand remained on top of it. Our eyes met. "I developed these personally," Martin said quietly. "Didn't let any of my staff handle them. And I haven't looked at them beyond what's necessary for processing. But I stand by what I said. Look at these alone first." "You saw something?" It wasn't a question. "I saw enough to know they're not what you're expecting." He released the envelope. "I'm sorry. I truly am." I drove home with the envelope on the passenger seat, untouched. Whatever was inside felt radioactive, dangerous. Part of me wanted to throw it into the river, let Sarah's secrets drown in the same water that held her ashes, but I couldn't. She was gone. And these photographs were all I had left. My apartment felt different when I got home. Colder, despite the late afternoon sun streaming through the windows. I poured myself a whiskey, though I rarely drank, and sat at the kitchen table with the envelope in front of me. My hands shook as I opened it. The first photographs were exactly what I'd expected. Sarah's garden in various stages of bloom. Close-ups of rose petals with morning dew. The geometric patterns of her tomato plants. Her eye for composition had always been extraordinary. Finding beauty in the mundane, I relaxed slightly, sipping my drink. Maybe Martin had been overly cautious. Maybe then I saw the next series of images. My world tilted sideways. They were still in Sarah's garden, but she wasn't alone. A man stood beside her, his hand on her waist. He was tall, dark-haired, younger than me by at least a decade. In the next photo, they were laughing together, his head thrown back in joy. In the third, they were kissing among the roses. My roses. The ones I'd planted for our 5th anniversary? I couldn't breathe. The room spun. I shuffled through more photos, each one a dagger. Sarah and this man at a coffee shop. Sarah and this man at the harbor, the one where I'd scattered her ashes, thinking it was special to us. Sarah and this man in what looked like a hotel room, his shirt unbuttoned, her hand on his chest. The whiskey glass slipped from my fingers and shattered on the floor. I barely noticed there were more. So many more? Candid shots that spoke of intimacy, of inside jokes, of a relationship that had depth and time. This wasn't a brief affair. This was something real. And then I found the photographs that made everything infinitely worse. They were dated shots. Timestamps in the corner, a feature on her camera I'd forgotten existed. The earliest ones were from 18 months ago, 6 months before her diagnosis. The most recent were from 2 weeks before she died. She'd carried on this relationship through her entire illness, through every chemotherapy session I'd sat beside her for, through every night I'd held her hair back while she vomited, through every moment I'd promised her we'd fight this together. I was shaking now. Rage and grief and betrayal mixing into something I'd never felt before. I wanted to scream. I wanted to destroy something. Instead, I just sat there, cycling through the photographs again and again. Trying to understand, that's when I noticed something else. In many of the photos, there were other people visible in the background. At the coffee shop, in the garden, at the harbor, and I recognized some of them. Emma, Sarah's sister. My best friend, Thomas. Our neighbor, Julie. They were there in the background, clearly aware of what was happening, watching, knowing, everyone had known. Everyone except me. The grief I'd been carrying for 8 months transformed into something darker. I'd mourned a woman who never existed. I'd treasured a marriage that was a lie. I'd been the devoted husband to a woman who'd been sharing her final months with someone else. I spent that entire night going through the photographs, documenting everything. I scanned each image with my phone, created folders, organized them by date and location. By dawn, I had a complete timeline of Sarah's betrayal, annotated and archived, but that wasn't enough. Knowing wasn't enough. They'd all watched me grieve. They'd attended her funeral. They'd offered condolences. They'd let me believe in a love story that was fiction. That morning, I called in sick to work for the first time since Sarah's funeral. Then I started making plans. The first thing I did was request Sarah's medical records. As her surviving spouse, I had the right to access them. It took 3 days for the hospital to process the request. 3 days I spent researching, planning, thinking. When the records arrived, I found what I'd suspected. Sarah's emergency contact had been changed 8 months before her death. Not to me. To a man named Marcus Reed. Marcus Reed. Finally, a name for the face in the photographs. A simple internet search told me everything I needed to know. He was a photographer, ironically enough. Ran a studio downtown that specialized in portrait work. His website showed a talented artist with an eye for capturing emotion. Client testimonials praised his sensitivity. His ability to make people feel seen? I bet he made Sarah feel very seen. His social media was public, full of artistic shots and philosophical musings about life and beauty. Nothing about Sarah, of course. No mourning posts for a lost love. He'd carried on as if she'd never existed, as if their 18-month relationship meant nothing, or maybe she'd meant everything. And he was grieving privately, just as I had been. That thought made my rage burn hotter. I spent days watching him from a distance, learning his routines. He opened his studio at 9, closed at 6. Had lunch at a cafe 2 blocks away. Met friends for drinks every Thursday at a wine bar called Vintage. He looked happy, unburdened, while I'd spent 8 months drowning in grief. He'd moved on seamlessly. That's when I decided on my approach. Revenge, I'd learned, wasn't about destruction. It was about revelation, about forcing people to face the truth of their actions. I created an anonymous email account and sent Marcus a simple message. "I know about Sarah. We should talk." He responded within an hour. "Who is this?" "Someone who cares about the truth." "Coffee tomorrow at noon. Luigi's Cafe." There was a long pause. Then, "I'll be there." Luigi's was a busy spot, full of students and freelancers tapping away on laptops. I arrived early, chose a table in the back corner where I could see the entrance. At noon exactly, Marcus walked in. He looked uncertain, scanning the room. I raised my hand and recognition flickered across his face. He'd seen me before, probably. At the funeral, if he'd been bold enough to attend, or in photographs Sarah might have shown him. He approached slowly and sat down across from me. Up close, I could see the guilt in his eyes. "David," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. "Marcus." No, I kept my voice steady, conversational. "Thank you for meeting me." He swallowed hard. "How did you find out?" I pulled out my phone, opened the folder of scanned photographs. Sarah had a film camera. I finally got around to developing it. The color drained from his face as I slid the phone across the table. He looked at the screen, at images of himself with my wife, and something in him seemed to break. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "God, David, I'm so sorry." "For which part?" I asked calmly. "For sleeping with my wife? For being there during her treatment? For letting me believe our marriage was real? For attending her funeral and watching me cry over a woman who was living a double life?" "I didn't attend the funeral." His voice was hoarse. "She asked me not to. Said it would be too complicated. How considerate of her." I took the phone back. "Tell me something, Marcus. Did she love you?" He looked up, tears in his eyes. "I don't think that's... Did she love you?" I repeated, harder this time.
Yes.
The word came out broken, and I loved her. "I know that doesn't mean anything to you. I know I'm the villain in your story, but it was real. What we had was real. And why am I the one who was her husband? Why am I the one whose name is on her death certificate? If she loved you so much, why was I the one holding her hand when she died?" He flinched. "She wanted to tell you. Near the end, she wanted to come clean, but what? But I convinced her not to." He met my eyes. "I told her there was no point in destroying you with the truth when she was already dying. That you could keep your memories intact. That it was kinder that way." I laughed, a harsh sound that made other patrons glance our way. "Kinder? You thought lying to me was kinder? Thought letting you remember your marriage as something beautiful was kinder then? Shattering everything right before you lost? Her? Yes. How noble." I leaned forward. Did you know she changed her emergency contact to you? That the hospital called you first when things got bad?" His silence was answer enough. "Did you know that her sister knew? That my best friend knew? That half our neighborhood apparently knew I was the idiot husband who couldn't see what was happening in his own marriage? David, did you know?" I continued, my voice dropping to something dangerous. "I spent 8 months grieving a woman who never existed? That I cried myself to sleep thinking about our last kiss, our last I love you, when all of that was contaminated by her relationship with you?" Marcus was crying now, genuine tears streaming down his face. I know, and I'm sorry. I've been carrying this guilt since she died. Every day, knowing you were out there mourning, I couldn't even publicly acknowledge my own loss because of what we'd done to you." "Poor you," I said flatly. "Let me ask you something else. When did it start?" He wiped his eyes. "Does it matter? Tell me." "She came to my studio for a portrait session about 2 years ago. Said she wanted nice photos before she got too old." He laughed bitterly. "She was only 38. She wasn't old at all. We just connected, started meeting for coffee, then dinners, then more. So 6 months of emotional affair before it became physical," I calculated. 6 months of her coming home to me, sleeping in our bed, planning our future, while building something with you. I'm not proud of it. Neither was she. But David, she was unhappy. She'd been unhappy for a long time." The words hit like a physical blow. "She never said she wouldn't. That's who Sarah was. She didn't want to hurt you. She cared about you. She really did, but she wasn't in love with you anymore. Maybe she never was. Not the way you needed her to be." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly. "You don't get to rewrite our history. You don't get to tell me what my wife felt or didn't feel. Just telling you what she told me." Marcus stood too, his voice urgent. "She said you were a good man, a kind man. But that being with you felt like wearing shoes that used to fit but didn't anymore. She felt trapped, David. And then she met me, and for the first time in years, she felt like herself again. And then she got cancer," I said coldly. "How convenient for everyone that she died before having to make a real choice." His face crumpled. "That's not fair. Fair." I stepped closer. "You want to talk about fair? You gotta be the exciting secret. The passionate love affair. The person she lit up for. I gotta be the caretaker. The nurse. The one who cleaned up her vomit and changed her sheets and watched her waste away. You got her joy, Marcus? I got her death." The cafe had gone quiet around us. People were staring. I didn't care. "I loved her too," Marcus said desperately. "I was there for her too in the ways I could be. You think it was easy, watching her die from a distance? Not being able to visit her in the hospital? Having to pretend I was just a friend when I called to check on her? I lost her too, David. We both did." "No." I shook my head. "You lost a girlfriend you'd been seeing for 18 months. I lost my wife of 12 years. It's not the same." I turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing. Her sister Emma, my best friend Thomas, the neighbors. They all knew, didn't they?" Marcus nodded miserably. "Sarah asked them to keep it quiet. To let you have your peace." "My peace," I repeated. "Right." I walked out of the cafe into the bright afternoon sun, leaving Marcus standing there with his guilt and his grief and his justifications. But I wasn't done. Not even close. That night, I composed a long email. In it, I attached every photograph from Sarah's camera. Every image of her with Marcus, every time stamps showing the duration and depth of their relationship. I wrote a detailed explanation of what I'd discovered, how I'd found out, and what it had cost me. Then I sent it to 15 people. Emma, Sarah's sister. Thomas, my best friend. Julie and Mark, our neighbors who'd apparently watched the affair unfold from their kitchen window. Sarah's parents. My parents. Our close friends who'd attended the funeral. Everyone who'd offered me sympathy while knowing the truth. The subject line was simple. The truth about Sarah. The responses started coming in within hours. Emma called first, hysterical. "David, please let me explain." "Explain what?" That you knew your sister was cheating on me and said nothing? That you watched me plan her funeral, listened to my eulogy about our perfect love, and didn't have the decency to tell me the truth? She was dying. What was I supposed to do? She begged me not to tell you. She was my sister, David. I had to choose her. You chose wrong, I said, and hung up. Thomas showed up at my apartment that evening, pounding on the door. I let him in, curious to hear his justification. You ambushed everyone, he said angrily. You sent those photos to her parents, David. To her parents. They didn't need to see their daughter like that. So they attended her funeral and let me give a speech about what a devoted wife she was. They accepted my grief as if it was legitimate. They knew, Thomas. Everyone knew but me, because Sarah asked us to protect you. He ran his hands through his hair. She knew how much the truth would destroy you, so she asked everyone who loved her to keep the secret. And we did, because she was dying. And what were we supposed to do? Tell me the truth, I said quietly. That's what friends do. That's what family does. And what would that have accomplished? She was terminal, David. Stage 4. There was no coming back from that. Telling you would have just meant her last months were filled with anger and recrimination instead of what? Instead of me being her loyal little caretaker while she spent her emotional energy on her lover? Thomas flinched. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Explain it to me, because I'm trying to understand how everyone I trusted could look me in the eye and lie to me for 18 months. We weren't lying, Thomas said desperately. We were just omitting. There's a difference. Not to me. I opened the door. Get out. David, get out of my apartment, Thomas. We're done. He left. And I stood there in the silence, feeling the satisfaction of watching another false relationship crumble. Over the next week, my phone exploded with messages. Voicemails from Sarah's parents begging me to understand. Texts from mutual friends, some angry, some apologetic, all desperate to make me see that they'd done what they thought was right. Julie from next door left a note on my door. We watched your pain and wanted to tell you so many times. But Sarah was dying. We thought mercy was more important than truth. We were wrong. I'm sorry, but I didn't want their apologies. I wanted them to feel what I felt. The betrayal. The isolation. The realization that the people you trust can look you in the eye and lie to you for months or years, all while telling themselves they're doing it out of love. I'd become a ghost in my own life, haunting the edges of a story everyone else knew but me. Now, they could haunt their own guilt. The only person who didn't respond was Sarah's mother. 2 weeks after I sent the email, a package arrived at my door. Inside was a letter in her handwriting, shaky but legible. Dear David, it read. I've spent these weeks trying to find words to explain, to apologize, to make you understand why we kept Sarah's secret. But the truth is, there is no explanation that will heal what you're feeling. We were wrong. Not wrong to protect our dying daughter, but wrong to think we could protect you by lying. Sarah loved you, David. That much was true. But she also loved Marcus, and trying to reconcile those two truths destroyed her in ways that cancer never could. She was torn between duty and desire, between the man she'd built a life with and the man who made her feel alive again. In the end, the cancer made the choice for her. I know that doesn't help. I know you want someone to blame, and we deserve that blame. But please know that Sarah died in agony over what she'd done to you. Her last words to me were, "Take care of David. He deserves better than what I gave him." She was right. You did deserve better. I'm just sorry it took her death for any of us to be honest about that. Please forgive us. If not now, then someday. And please forgive Sarah. She was human, flawed, and trying her best in an impossible situation. I read the letter 3 times, then filed it away with the photographs. Evidence, documentation, proof that my grief had been based on a lie, but something had shifted. The rage that had sustained me for weeks was beginning to fade, replaced by something more complex. Emptiness, maybe, or clarity. A month after sending the email, I went back to Martin's Photoshop. The bell chimed above the door, and he looked up from his work with knowing eyes. "Mr. Chen," he said quietly, "I wondered if you'd come back. Why did you warn me? I asked. How did you know? Martin set down the loop he'd been using. I told you I've been in this business 40 years. You develop enough film, you start to recognize certain patterns, the way people look at each other, the kind of photos people take when they think no one will see them. Your wife's photos, they had a specific quality: intimacy, secret intimacy. And when someone brings in film from a deceased loved one, and it contains that kind of intimacy with someone who isn't them, shrugged. I've seen it before. It never ends well. You could have refused to develop them. Told me the film was damaged. Would that have been kinder? Martin asked. To let you live in ignorance? I don't know anymore, I admitted. Everyone seems to think ignorance was the merciful choice. Maybe they were right. Were they? Martin studied me. You look angry, hurt, but you also look like you're seeing clearly for the first time in a while. Is that worse than comfortable delusion? I didn't have an answer. For what it's worth, Martin continued, I'm sorry you had to find out this way. But the truth has value even when it cuts, especially when it cuts. I left the shop with his words echoing in my mind. The truth has value. Did it? Had any of this been worth it? The revenge I'd enacted had been clean, surgical. I'd destroyed the carefully maintained lie that everyone had built around me. I'd forced them to confront their complicity. I'd taken away their comfortable rationalizations and made them face what they'd done, but I didn't feel better. I just felt empty. 3 months after developing the film, I finally did something I'd been avoiding. I went back to our storage unit, to the boxes of Sarah's belongings that I hadn't been able to sort through after her death. In the third box, I found her journals. Years' worth of handwritten pages documenting her thoughts, her fears, her life. I'd never read them before. It had seemed like an invasion of privacy. Privacy. What a joke. I took the journals home and spent a weekend reading them cover to cover. And there, in her own words, was the truth I'd been both seeking and dreading. She wrote about meeting me in college, how I'd been kind and stable and everything she thought she wanted after a chaotic childhood, how she'd convinced herself that safety and love were the same thing. She wrote about our wedding day. I'm marrying David tomorrow. He's a good man. I'm lucky. So why do I feel like I'm checking into a hotel I'll never be able to leave? She wrote about the years that followed, the comfort, the routine, the slow realization that comfort wasn't the same as passion, and that she'd built a life that felt more like a cage with every passing year. And then she wrote about Marcus. I met someone today, a photographer. We talked for 3 hours about art and light and the way beauty can exist even in darkness. I haven't felt this alive in years. I know I should feel guilty. I know I should shut this down before it becomes something. But God, it feels so good to just be again. To not be playing the role of David's wife. To just be Sarah. The entries continued. Her growing relationship with Marcus, her guilt over the affair, her attempts to end it, her inability to stay away, and then came the diagnosis, stage 2 breast cancer. The doctor says my odds are good if we're aggressive with treatment. I haven't told Marcus yet. I'm terrified he'll leave. I'm terrified he'll stay. I'm terrified of what this means for David, who deserves a wife who loves him the way he loves me, not a woman who's been pretending for years. I should tell David the truth about everything. Give him a chance to leave with his dignity intact. But I can't. I'm too much of a coward. I need him too much. I need his steadiness, his care, his unwavering devotion. Marcus gives me passion, but David gives me survival. And right now, I need to survive. The later entries were harder to read. Her treatment, her deterioration, her increasing dependence on me for physical care while maintaining her emotional connection to Marcus. David held my hair today while I threw up for the 3rd time. He never complains, never makes me feel like a burden. I am such a horrible person. How can I do this to him? How can I let him take care of me while I'm texting Marcus about how much I miss him? But I can't give up Marcus either. He's the only thing keeping me human through this. When I'm with David, I'm a patient, a sick wife who needs managing. When I'm with Marcus, I'm still Sarah, Still a woman worth desiring, not just a body betraying itself. I'm going to hell for this. I know I am. But I can't stop. I need them both. I need David's strength and Marcus's fire. I need to be taken care of, and I need to be wanted. Is that so wrong? Can't a dying woman have both? The final entry was dated 3 days before she died. I'm out of time. The doctor says weeks at most. I need to tell David. I need to come clean. He deserves to know who he's losing. But Marcus says I shouldn't, that it would only hurt David more, that I should let him keep his memories pure. Maybe he's right. Maybe the truth is overrated. Maybe dying with this secret is the last gift I can give the man who's given me everything. David, if you ever read this, and I hope you never do, please know that I loved you. Not the way you loved me, maybe. Not the way I should have. But in my own broken, selfish way, I did love you. You deserved better. You deserved someone who could love you completely. I'm sorry I wasn't her. I'm sorry for so many things. But mostly, I'm sorry that my cowardice meant you never got to choose. You never got to decide if my kind of broken love was enough. I made that choice for you, and that was cruel. Forgive me, David, or don't. Either way, please live. Please be happy. Please find someone who can give you what I couldn't. You deserve that. You deserve everything. I closed the journal and sat in the silence of our apartment, feeling something crack open inside me. Not my heart, that had already broken. Something deeper. The foundation of my identity as the betrayed husband, the righteous victim, the man who'd been cruelly deceived, because the truth was more complicated than that. Sarah had been selfish. She'd been a coward. She'd used me while maintaining a relationship with someone else. All of that was true. But she'd also been terrified, sick, dying, trying desperately to hold onto any piece of life that made her feel human. She'd been wrong, but she'd also been suffering in ways I'd never fully understood. And I'd been so focused on being the perfect husband, so determined to support her through her illness, that I'd never ask the harder questions. Had she been happy before the diagnosis? Had our marriage been everything I'd believed it was? Or had I been so comfortable in my own certainty that I'd missed all the signs of her discontent? The truth was, I'd been as guilty of self-deception as she'd been of deception. I'd wanted to believe in our perfect love story because it made me feel good about myself, the devoted husband, the good man, the one who did everything right. But marriage isn't about one person doing everything right. It's about two people being honest, even when honesty is uncomfortable. And neither of us had been honest. She'd hidden her affair. I'd hidden my head in the sand, refusing to see that she was unhappy because acknowledging it would have meant acknowledging my own failures. The revenge I'd enacted suddenly felt hollow. Yes, everyone had kept Sarah's secret, but they'd done it because a dying woman had begged them to, and who could say no to that? Yes, they'd let me grieve under false pretenses. But what would the alternative have been? Telling me the truth while she lay dying, ensuring her last days were filled with anger and recrimination? Maybe they'd made the wrong choice. Maybe there was no right choice. Maybe the whole situation was just tragic. And I'd been so desperate for someone to blame that I'd lashed out at everyone around me. I thought about Marcus, crying in that cafe, about Emma's hysterical phone call, about Thomas's desperate attempts to make me understand, about Sarah's mother's letter, pleading for forgiveness. They'd all lost her too. They'd all been trying to navigate an impossible situation with no good answers. And I'd punished them for it because it was easier than accepting that sometimes life is just cruel. And people make mistakes, and love is complicated. And there are no villains, just humans trying their best and failing. That night, I did something I hadn't done since developing the film. I pulled out the photographs of Sarah alone, the ones without Marcus. Her in her garden, smiling at the camera. Her at the harbor, face turned toward the sun. Her sitting in our living room, reading a book, unaware she was being photographed. In those images, I could see both versions of her. The woman I'd loved and married, the woman who'd been unhappy but trying, the woman who'd made terrible choices but also faced her mortality with whatever grace she could muster. She'd been human. Flawed, selfish, scared, brave, weak, and strong, all at once. Just like me. Just like everyone, the revenge I'd wanted had been about making people hurt the way I hurt. But hurt wasn't a finite resource. Creating more of it didn't diminish mine. It just made everything heavier. I spent the next week reaching out to everyone I'd sent that email to. I didn't apologize for telling them the truth. They'd needed to hear it. But I apologized for the cruelty of my delivery, for the way I'd weaponized their guilt. Emma and I met for coffee. She cried, I cried, and we talked about Sarah, the real Sarah, not the sanitized version we'd been maintaining. It was painful and honest and healing in ways I hadn't expected. Thomas and I went for a long walk. He admitted he'd always known Sarah was unhappy, but hadn't wanted to interfere in our marriage. I admitted I'd been willfully blind, preferring comfortable ignorance to difficult conversations. We agreed to try rebuilding our friendship slowly. Sarah's parents invited me to dinner. We looked at photo albums, told stories, and for the first time, we talked about her as a complete person, her strengths and her weaknesses, her kindness and her selfishness. It felt more real than any of the grief we'd shared before. I even reached out to Marcus. We met at a different cafe, Neutral Ground, and had a conversation that was calmer than our first. I loved her, he said simply. I know that doesn't excuse anything, but it's the truth. And I think in her way she loved both of us. Not fairly, maybe. Not well. But she tried. She did. I agreed. We all did. Are you going to be okay? Marcus asked. Eventually, I said. Are you? Eventually, we parted with an understanding that we'd never be friends, but we didn't have to be enemies either. We were just two men who'd loved the same complicated woman, had to live with the aftermath of her choices. A year after developing that film, I finally packed up Sarah's things. Not to throw them away, but to make room for what came next. I kept her journals, the photographs, and a few items that mattered. The rest I donated or gave to her family. I sold our apartment and moved to a smaller place across town. Started therapy to process the grief, the betrayal, and my own complicity in the situation. Began dating again, cautiously. With a new understanding that relationships require honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Martin from the Photoshop became an unlikely friend. We'd meet occasionally for coffee, and he'd share stories from his 40 years of developing film, the confessions captured on celluloid, the secrets revealed, the ways photography could expose truth or create beautiful lies. Do you regret it? He asked me once. Developing those roles? Finding out? I thought about it carefully. I regret how I used the information, how I hurt people who were already hurting. But do I regret knowing the truth? No, the lie was killing me slowly. The truth hurt all at once, but then it started to heal. The truth has value, Martin said, echoing his words from that first day. Even when it cuts, I agreed. I never remarried. Maybe I will someday. But I learned something important through all of this. That love is messy and people are complicated, and sometimes there are no good guys or bad guys. Just people making impossible choices and trying to live with the consequences. Sarah was unfaithful. She lied. She used me. All of that is true, but she was also scared and dying and trying to find meaning in her final months. She cared about me, even if she didn't love me the way I needed. She made choices I don't agree with, but they were her choices to make, and I was blind. I prioritized my own comfort over honest communication. I played the role of perfect husband without ever asking if the performance was what she needed. I loved an idealized version of her instead of the real, complicated woman she was. We both failed each other. We both loved each other. Both things can be true. The camera sits on my shelf now, a reminder not of betrayal, but of complexity. Of the difference between the stories we tell and the truth we live, of the importance of seeing clearly, even when clarity hurts. Sometimes I still pull out those photographs. Not to torture myself, but to remember. To honor the truth of what our relationship was flawed, painful, real, and somehow still valuable, despite everything. Sarah died 18 months ago. I finally started to let her go. Not the sanitized memory I tried to preserve, but the actual person, beautiful and broken and human. That's the thing about revenge. The real kind isn't about destroying others. It's about refusing to let their deceptions destroy you. It's about taking back your own narrative, acknowledging the truth, choosing to move forward anyway. I took my late wife's camera to be developed, and the photographer warned me to look alone. He was right. But eventually, I was ready to share what I found, not as a weapon, but as a truth that needed telling, and in telling it, in facing it, in letting it be complicated and painful and real, I finally started to heal. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. We all carry secrets, bear betrayals, and struggle with the gap between who we want to be and who we actually are. Maybe you see yourself in this story. Maybe you see someone you've lost, or someone who hurt you, or someone you hurt. Whatever brought you here, hope you take this with you. The truth matters, even when it's painful, especially when it's painful. Because only the truth, the messy, complicated, uncomfortable truth can set you free. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you feel something or think differently about love or loss or betrayal, leave a comment below. Share your own story if you want. We're all trying to make sense of this complicated business of being human. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, the photographs we take, the memories we keep, the stories we tell ourselves about our lives, they're all just versions of the truth. Sometimes we need to develop the film to see what was really there all along.